afternoon, everyone. A very welcome to all of you. Welcome to another show of In Conversation with Bright Minds. And today we have with us Dr. Soumyatanu Mukherjee. Sir is an associate professor of economics at XLRI Delhi, and he has done his PhD from University of Nottingham and his master's from University of Calcutta. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much. So it's my pleasure to be associated with Bright Minds and to give this to be introduced with all of you in this beautiful campus. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. So the topic that we're going to go ahead and discuss today is going to be global trade in uncertain world and Indian perspective. So over to you. You go ahead and you point out your views, and then we will go ahead and have a conversation accordingly.
Sure. So essentially, these days we are living in a very uncertain world. Pre-COVID and post-COVID, there has been a huge change. Now, if we start from pre-COVID situation, then we have seen that lately the growth story, the story of structural transformation in all developing countries, especially in Southeast Asia or South Asia, has largely been investment driven. So what happened, that's a very good thing, but when we are talking about structural transformation, it's also important to understand that to which direction the transformation is happening. Is it from agricultural to manufacturing, or agricultural to services, or agricultural to which kind of services? Is it traditional, internationally non-tradable services that ought to be less productive, or is it happening in the technology readiness, the sectors that are very much ahead in terms of technological frontier? So this is a question that is basically bothering many economists, including our previous CA, Mr. Professor Soumyatanu, Danny Rotary, and Petya Topolova, Nina Batsinik, and so on and so forth. Now, what actually we have noticed, or the economists have noticed, that this kind of India has not only an agricultural sector, but also there are divergence, or there are dualism within the pattern of agricultural activities. Some agricultural activities within the rural economy are largely informal, are largely unregistered activity. But these sectors, why these sectors are still existing in India, we have to understand. It's not only in India. You talk about Africa, yes, it's there. You talk about even China, yes, it is there. Why these sectors are there? Because they have the major advantage of producing cheap labor. That is the reason these sectors are there. The problem is that when we are talking about vocal for local, right? So this vocal for local is a good thing, but at the same time, we need to understand that over dependence on the local and over dependence on the traditional, over dependence on the non-tradable, these non-tradable informal sectors are good for the economy to grow. It may not, because when actually it went from the traditional non-tradable informal sectors, if you source the cheap labor from there, you can utilize them in manufacturing, but then when you try to export them, then at the border you may ask the question that does your product follow certain standards? Say for example that whether actually it is using more child labor, okay, which is very which is extremely undesirable, whether it's extremely pollution intensive, okay, what is the carbon content of your production, okay, what a carbon footprint. So do you have that amount of carbon footprint that you can leverage on, or what is the carbon emission that you have? So that's why you need to switch back to the sourcing of imported input from abroad. And it is happening that if you want to proliferate in the global market, you need to be sustainable. Okay, and if you want to be sustainable, then, and because you can see that after 2013 that CSR mandate, which is known as section 135, you need to report all these things, that how you are doing the production. You need to provide a white paper. Now there actually will be a problem if you take more use of the local inputs, especially those inputs that are pollution intensive, those inputs that are absolutely no in terms of international standards. Okay, so now the issue is that so that is something that we need to avoid. So what should we do? We first need to look into building of proper infrastructure across all the segments of the economy, including the rural areas, because the guys who decide to migrate, they need to decide, they need to think about that what benefit will it do for my lifestyle if I become more technologically savvy. Okay, if I get to know the use of computer software, if I understand that if I am getting interested about how big data, how Internet of Things, all these things are going to operate in the real world, if I acquire all these skills, what are the job opportunities waiting for me? Okay, so the moment actually these realizations are there within our youths, especially those who are living in a rural area, those who are living in the very distant segment of the economy, then I think that we can say that yes, we are in a process. We are in a process to be the developed country within the 2047 benchmark. Now, not only this is what I've largely talked is basically about the internal policies. You know that the India can take care of the internal policies. But if I am talking about the global policies, then also there are certain sectors, there are certain segments of the industry where we should look into, like textile industry. That is extremely neglected industry. So sometimes back I asked Mr. Surajit Bhalla about what is happening in the textile sector. So he replied that वो तो textile sector में खुद का पैर में खुद कुल्हाड़ी मार दिया हमने, तो ऐसे ही पॉलिसी है. इशू क्या है कि टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री को अगर we had actually a lot of resources, we were extremely rich of resources in textile industry, but then what happened, because there is also the withdrawal of technical barriers, there is also withdrawal of the quota and all these things. I can understand, but the most favored nations that the multi-fiber agreements withdrawal, the multi-fiber agreements withdrawal actually did a blow to the textile industry. But still, you know that some countries, when actually the multi-fiber agreements were in place, that time Indian government could have taken care of textile industry a bit, so that they could be at the level of Vietnam, China, Bangladesh, and India is far more behind than each of these nations in terms of India's textile business across the world. So essentially, what India can do, India cannot outcompete Vietnam, India cannot outcompete Bangladesh, cannot outcompete China. Now, what India can do? That is where actually this G20 success is very relevant. India can leverage, let's say, the market of Vietnam. How India can leverage? India can ask the Vietnamese company to get into some partnership. It can be joint venture, it can be merger acquisition, or it can be strategic alliance. Whatever be the mode of partnership, if the Vietnamese company, let's say, I'm giving an example, it can be Vietnam, it can be Bangladesh, it can be China, but considering the relationship between India and China, let me confine myself within India and Vietnam. So the moment actually you get it through Vietnamese company, then what will happen? That Vietnamese company is taking the advantage of cheap labor and efficient labor that is available in India. So then Vietnamese companies, then what will happen? That India's raw materials for textile, as or dye or something, because these things are essentially banned. They cannot use it from, they cannot import it from OECD countries. Azodai is absolutely no. Okay. Now what happens that if let's say that a Vietnamese company are using the that Indian raw materials, and then what happens that will actually give a kind of that fuel to the Indian textile industry. At the same time, that will also help Vietnamese company in terms of their cost advantage. Then they can export to the OECD market. Okay, unless and until there will be some technical barriers to trade, Indian companies can leverage on the potential relationship. So essentially, like that India developed the relationship with Africa. So why actually this is important? Okay, because of the natural resources that Africa do have. But at the same time, if you need to extract those natural resources, if you need to process those natural resources, then you need cheap labor. And maybe apart from outside Africa, you can think of India as one potential source of cheap and efficient labor. So that may facilitate some kind of source of work, source of job, for the migrant workers here. And that's why I think that in this uncertain world, these kind of relationships are very important. Not only that, you see that there are something known as resource dependency. Now, in terms of research, yes, people are talking about that you always need to diversify your portfolio of choices, right? So here also, from the perspective of industry, from the perspective of firms also, this is true. Because the moment you are talking about source of several inputs, then it is not only the local, but also different global partners you need to think of. So if there is a COVID, if there is a resource crunch due to some kind of other forms of pandemic or other forms of issues, then actually you can always recourse to some alternative partner, right? So that's why I think from that perspective also, the G20 is very, very timely and relevant in today's world. And if you ask me, that I think in terms of macroeconomic structure also India is doing pretty good. And to be honest, I am quite hopeful of Indian economy, and I believe that these little bit adjustments, if India can make through, and which I believe that she will, and then actually India will definitely be in the list of developed countries by 2047.
Okay. So, sir, I have multiple questions from
Please.
what you spoke. I will begin with the first part that you talked about, where you said that India transitioned from its primary sector to the service sector, neglecting the manufacturing sector. And you mentioned that we want to go ahead and make the youth aware, especially in the local sector, as to what this new service sector brings to them. But is it really a true thing that can happen in India? Would it really be possible to make the youth in the rural area aware of the opportunities that they have in the service sector? Because the rural area is really backward, and taking them from there and bringing them to the service sector, which is tradable, it doesn't seem like a far-sighted
Not exactly. I think that's what it needs some channelized intervention. Like you first kind of make actually some some computer surfing points, so where actually most of the people can access. It can be public as well, so people can access the computer, people can surf the internet, people can see the job posting, okay? And you make them aware, that newspaper, the radio, many people still these days actually listen to the radio, isn't it? So through radio you can post some jobs, you can post the job vacancies, you can advertise job vacancies. So it depends on the strategies, how do you educate the individual. So that's why institution, the building of proper institution, the building of proper growth, some infrastructure is very, very important. So I think that even in the, that government schools across, especially in the rural area, that we can look for, appoint the teachers and instructors who can talk about all these things. They can use, try to make use, if we can modernize the schools, then what will happen that in these schools, the more and more use of, or more and more availability of modern facilities, okay, the IT facilities, that will help the students as well to develop an inquisitive mind from the very beginning. And in the schools, if we give the training, to the kids of today, then tomorrow definitely it happens across generation. It cannot happen overnight. But at the same time, that once you give the proper training, then I think that it will be that is actually my point. And without building up proper institutions or proper infrastructure, you cannot aspire of doing that rapid and directed structural changes.
Right. So, sir, even when India got independence, ever since that, we have been talking about something called as drain of wealth.
Yeah.
What if we spend all our investment on educating people, and instead of us getting a good human resource, the human resource actually goes out and does not work for India? How do we make sure that that advantage is leveraged to India's benefit?
Okay, I am not going into the remittance income. So because Kerala is the topmost guy in India within that. So, apart from remittance income is one thing. But if you don't think about remittance income, see that I would say that that within India, I think. I have seen even in that we are very reluctant about designated job posting. Let me tell you one thing, that when actually we even for us as well, when we were at our college days or university days, we always look into the econjobs.com, Times Jobs, and all these things. So we have these dedicated job market portals, but is it true for every sphere? Is it true for all kinds of jobs? No. Especially in India, no. Even in UK, I have been in the UK not only during my PhD, but also before joining here. I was working in Southampton Business School for the last 3 years. So essentially, I have seen that there are that very designated job search activity that is happening in the UK. There are and they are all government funded. They are all public, not private. Okay, so I would say that this kind of job portals, that's why infrastructure I have talked about. So not only institutions but also infrastructure development is very, very integral part.
Got it. Right.
Yeah.
So then you talked about the various things that one must keep in mind while the manufacturing takes place, because now we have very serious rules and regulations before it can be exported.
That's the thing. Yeah.
So because most of still the informal sector is a big sector in India. How do we make sure that they understand the nitty-gritties of what is required before things can be exported? How to educate this entire sector, or how to uplift this thing in India?
See, that I think that again, awareness is a very, very integral part these days. Now we have CSR, right? So we have to disclose everything, right? So the issue is that investment we need to make to educate all our stakeholders, because if I am talking about informal sectors, then they are also our implicit stakeholders. If I am a formal sector, if I have a formal manufacturing sector, and my another implicit stakeholder is an informal sector from which I am sourcing the raw material. So I need to make sure, I need to make them understand that these are the things absolutely no. So these are the list of the things that you should not do. These are the things of the list that you can do, you may do. So, and these things should be available in local languages like Hindi or something like that, which is accessible to everybody. So then probably I would say that these things will be, it depends on awareness. I think proper investment on infrastructure, awareness, and again institutions. These three things are absolutely necessary.
And sir, what are your views about Atmanirbhar Bharat? Do you think it is in contradiction to promoting international trade, or does it actually?
Not at all. So Atmanirbhar Bharat has actually several facets. So you need to understand that what is the meaning of Atmanirbhar Bharat. See that when we are talking about a smartphone, we all know that parts and components are being manufactured. It's part of a global value chain, right? So, but Atmanirbhar Bharat, you can interpret it as if the final, if the final manufacturing is happening in India. Okay, so if the without, even if it is without significant value addition in India, but if the final manufacturing is happening in India, then it's an Indian product. Okay, and if you are talking about, let's say, like Indian khadi, yes, if you are talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, you purchase Indian khadi, you advertise for Indian khadi abroad. Whenever you know that we all have our contacts globally, so you sell, you advertise for your own product, right? So I do encourage the students to do that. Okay, and I think that that's the meaning of Atmanirbhar Bharat. So we should not misinterpret it as like, you know, that we are using the things that are not well enough or that are not sustainable enough, but still we are sourcing it because it is Atmanirbhar Bharat. It is not like that. It's basically kind of, you know, that obeying all the restrictions, all the product standards that we have in the international arena, and then we can try to proliferate the local business within the global market. So it is basically the thinking global, but thinking for local. That's the thing.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay, sure, sir. So one last thing that I wanted to ask. So you talked about trade divergence,
Yes.
right? Wherein Vietnam or any other can go ahead and take products from us, raw material, and then they can take it abroad. So if we continue doing this, won't it be the case that India would never be developing their own industry because they would always end up supplying the raw material?
Not all the industries, so especially the industry where we have seen that the potential are not too high. So let's say that, because if I am talking about that's why I took the example of garment industry. So garment industry, again, you know that instead of going engaging in stiffer competition with Vietnam, it is better to be acquired or to engage in merger acquisition or joint venture with some Vietnamese company and do the business together. In that way, it can cater the Vietnamese market as well, without engaging in major competition, which may make our Indian company bankrupt. So
Okay.
I think that's the way to interpret what I told.
But still, I mean, so it should only be there in the industries where
Not
the scope
yeah,
of growth
only
is-
those industries or only those particular segments where actually we have seen that growth potential is not very high. So you see that I am not talking about import substituting industrialization or ISI. You know that like infant industry argument. No, infant industry argument is not it's Lewis-Shinker hypothesis, but it is not the recent focus. It should not be the recent focus. Okay, so what happened, that happened in 1950s. But now we are in that very modern era, right? So we need to think about, yes, how we can proliferate globally, yet that how we can sustainably, how we can kind of without hurting ourselves. So that is the way I think that we can look for. But yes, we have actually many sectors where we can focus, like where we are doing very great. So why not, especially the services? I think the skill-based services industry is the future of India, right? So that's why I think that that's why I talked about the quick maturity industrialization and how the proper directed structural change is very, very important for the Indian economy to be the developed country.
Got it.
Okay.
So, sir, there has been a lot in the past about East Asian tigers and how they have been
Yeah.
focusing on education and health. Even when they were doing that, India never at that time focused on education and health, and somehow it was behind those
Yes.
East Asian tigers. So, do you think international trade can be improved in this uncertain environment if more resources are dedicated to education sector, or it should be in the manufacturing sector now?
I would say that education sector is the key these days. So you divert resources towards education sector. Not only that, you divert resources towards infrastructure, towards institution building, okay, towards awareness building, okay. So why? Because unless and until you invest on education, you cannot build awareness among the people. You cannot you cannot actually attract sufficient investment if you don't have good infrastructure in place. Okay, you need to be, India is doing great now in terms of ease of doing business, and that is the way to look forward, and that is the way to move ahead. I think India is on the right track these days.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So one last question for the audience. Because we talked about the environment being very uncertain
Yes.
for the trade, especially with we know that there was COVID, of course, and now we have war going on, of course. How does it impact India? Because now India is so much interlinked with all the countries. So, for example, we see that all of a sudden the oil prices started rising.
Yeah.
Do we think that here again the concept of making resources within India plays a role, or it is better to be interlinked and still depend on other countries for the resources?
See, that actually diversification is always good, and if you can, Atmanirbhar Bharat is that's why a very important project, and you are very right that making resources within India is a good concept. But again, you have to be conforming with the product standards that is there in the international market. So, and at the same time, that being interlinked is also good, because that you don't have to rely, if you get interlinked with diverse partners, then you don't have to rely for some resources to some particular partner. Okay, for nuclear reactor, you can now take a resource from UAE or something like that, isn't it? So essentially, my point is that you can, that just diversify your partners. Okay. And also, Atmanirbhar Bharat is also another important because that your local partner is also getting importance in these days, especially in the uncertain world. And resource dependency is something that we should avoid, with any particular partner. So we should always look for developing, new trade partners or new local partners in terms of more diversified portfolio of potential partners. So that's the way I think that we should move forward, especially with this uncertain world.
So where do you see India by 2047? International.
I think India is doing extremely good, and I would wonder if India would not achieve the developed country potential. Developed country, that particular badge by 2047. I am pretty sure that India will achieve that feat by 2047. We will be featured as a developed country.
Okay, we like to end on this positive note, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Most
It was a
welcome.
great session with you. Thank you, sir.
Cheers.